and the self, the sense of self that the personality has. So I began to look around to see. And when he said loss of self-respect, I smiled. And he said, oh, no, it's not what you're thinking. I said, how do you know what I'm thinking? Oh, he said, you're thinking that we suffered the loss of self-respect because of the presence of the conqueror in our own land. I said, yes. He said, oh, no, that may be there, but that's minimal. He said, the loss of self-respect is due to untouchability in Hinduism. A part of the Hindu family saying to another part of the Hindu family that it is of no account and no meaning, and no meaning. This rejection undermined the sense of self-respect both for the caste Hindu and for the outcast Hindu. So I began attacking that. And the first thing I did was to adopt in my own family, I'm a caste Hindu, to adopt in my own family an outcast girl. And this announced to all the caste Hindus, this is the road back. And the second thing I did was to change their name from Sudras or outcasts to Harijan. And the Harijan is a combination Hindi word that means child of God. For he said, if I can make every caste Hindu, anytime he refers to an outcast, call him a child of God, I will create in that caste Hindu the kind of moral congestion that cannot be relieved until he changes his attitude towards him. It's very interesting. Now, the significance of his contribution to the modern feeling and interpretation of nonviolence is at one point. He rested the dogma, the ethic of nonviolence into the hands of the masses, the least privileged of the Indians. And this said to them that even though we are this or that or the other in terms of no meaning and significance, Gandhiji feels that we are worthy to be the custodians of this ethical insight, the implementation of which will bring about a different kind of social climate for us and for all of India. And he thinks we can do it. And he placed a crown over our heads that we are trying to grow tall enough to wear. And I have an idea about what that means. When I was a little boy, so that you give you a little rest. When I was a little boy, my older sister had a boyfriend, which is natural. And he was a big boy in comparison to me, And they were playing what we call hardball up on one end of the playground, and the little boys were playing another kind of ball made out of tightly bound rags and ties that we call softball. So I said to my chum, I will bet you a cartwheel. A cartwheel was a big ginger cookie that's sold for a penny, 6 for a nickel. I said, I'll bet you a cartwheel that when Willie Thomas's turn comes to bat, he will let me bat in his place. So the bet was on. We stopped playing, ran up there, and I went to Willie and I said, Willie, when your turn comes, will you let me bat in your place? Oh, sure, Howard. Of course, you know why. He wanted me on his side. so I wouldn't talk. And when his turn came, I went to the bat, and the bat was so heavy that I could hardly handle it. And I stood at the bat, and the miracle happened. The big boy threw the ball as hard to me as he threw to the big boy. I was just a little boy, could hardly hold the bat, scared to death. But what he did for me in that moment created a new dimension of my own persona. Now, this is what happened to the masses of Indians when Ghandi assumed that the one thing that was available to them was also the most creative and dynamic and redemptive thing that could be done. Not only to change the society and make life uncomfortable for the British, but to put at their disposal a new and fresh and significant way of living. Now, the thing that followed from that is that, oh boy, well, I can't stop it, the watch, I mean. The thing that follows from that is this, that the effect on the life of the people, namely giving them a new sense of self, now, given this fact, they are much more conscious of all of the injustices that were placed upon them than they ever were before. And this is the dilemma of nonviolence. For when you become the custodian of that kind of creative increment, it enlarges the sense of the dignity of the individual who is the receptacle of this credential. And with this new sense of self, you become aware of things that have been happening to you all your life, but you had absorbed them and paid very little attention to them. Now, the whole area of your being becomes sensitized. And this is the danger moment for the dogma of nonviolence. For when I become aware of my predicament in a way of which I have not been aware before. Now I see the anatomy of injustice in a brand new way. And my first response to that is to renounce the thing that made it possible for me to become aware of it in the first place. And this is why men like Ghandi, and in another entirely different dimension and key, modern king on the American scene. I have time to go into that just a little. When these men began to work in somewhat the fashion as I have hastily outlined, so that as a result of what was transpiring in them, they became aware of pain, of misery, of injustice, of discrimination. And the awareness has a sense of immediacy about it. And the nature of their hate and their hostility now become articulate in them. Now this is a very important, a very subtle point, because it is happening all around us now. Now, hate becomes active in the lives of people who are developing latterly a sense of self. Hate becomes activated, that's better. But hate is not created by a fresh, a new awareness of the self. It merely becomes activated. Now, if I may illustrate it, whether in the life of the masses of one country or another, the masses of the people who have been systematically outside of this meaningful stream of the contemporary society, and hate in them very often is unactivated, if I may make a word. I guess there's such a word. It is hate that is hydrated. You know, it's like a sludge. You know what a sludge is? Well, I'll have to use the words. it's a sludge. It's all the liquid is out of it, and it's a sort of gooey stuff down in the bottom of the psyche, sealed off by the incrustation of the ancient iniquity in the environment. Now, the thing that happens is sometimes as a result of the kind of change that has taken place in the life of the people precipitated by the sort of thing that Ghandi or Martin did here, and sometimes as a result of changes in the society that may not be related to them as themselves. But whatever happens, however it happens, once these shifts take place, a little air gets down into the psyche, and the air activates the sludge. We are the custodian of an instrument of social change that we can use and no one can prevent us. In that moment of awareness, ancient fears disintegrated and a whole new people emerged. Now, in that emergence, with a new sense of self, new awareness of the extent of their misery became articulate. This is the point that I'm making. And with this articulation, violence, remember, quick tends to be efficient. Became the immediate handle. Now, and I will stop because I've got to get a train. So let me put it together. You can't ever quit this because your mind's. Now, what I've said is this, that given the necessity for social change, violence is the most obvious, the most available instrument, not only because of what it is, but because it is the instrument for social change that's a part of national policy. It's a part of the etiquette of the state, of government. It is quick, it is all these things. It does not touch the wheel. For it is always possible for the individual under the attack of violence to establish psychological distance between himself and the violence. And thereby work out private and personal immunity from its effect. Nonviolence insinuates itself into the will. It often is slow. Its most creative dimension is the way in which it activates the imagination of the individual or individuals, so that it becomes possible for them to project themselves into the other man's situation, place, and thereby open a way for him to do the same thing to them. There is no guarantee that non-violent direct action or non-violent indirect action will make for social change. The possibilities are that social change that is instrumented, if I may make a verb there, social change that is instrumented by nonviolence has the chance of involving protagonists into a single commitment, whereas violence guarantees that no such involvement will take place. For in the last analysis, and this really is the last sentence, there is but one place of refuge for any man on this planet, and that is in another man's heart. And what the non-violent man does, he makes of his heart a swinging door. And the violent man seals his door against intrusion and thereby becomes a prisoner in his own house.